Okay, so what we've got here is we have a 2019 Vox AC15 newly acquired for the studio, and what we're going to do is we are going to change the speaker. Now, normally this isn't too bad, however, on this particular model, we are going to have to remove both back panels, the reverb tank inside, and I'm going to have to pull the chassis. Now, the nice thing about this is that this is a bit of a twofer. In other words, I'm actually getting two speakers for the price of one, because the greenback that's in here then is going to get pulled and it will go into the black star that we've got over there and finally get rid of that awful black star. Blackbird 50, I think, is in there, which honestly is basically like a vintage 30 but built for like $40. And given what they were supposed to do with it, it's not too bad. But given the competition now in the studio, it needs to go. I'm going to film this in segments and upload it best I can. So first, let's get the screws off and get to the back panel. Now, one of the things that I want to mention before I start going into this is particularly what this amp is and why I have it. So though it's an AC15, as far as the model, make, number, and what's on your resale bill, what the circuit is more of a miniaturized AC30 with the top boost, which is kind of what the guitarists want to begin with. So you've got your master, you've got built-in tremolo, built-in reverb. This is all off the tube, none of this is digital. But then you've got your top boost circuit and your normal, to which I believe you don't jumper them, but you can run both channels at the same time if you have a splitter. This is very, very old school sound. It's got more gain than a typical AC sort of series would, but you can change that out with tubes or just keep the preamp gain low. But the reason I say all this is that it's close enough in tone to be able to justify the speaker swap for the greenback, which is in there, which is a fine speaker. However, it's period incorrect. The thing that should be in there should be the Vox Blue. Expensive speaker, yes, but really the only true way to get the Vox vintage tone. But as I stated before, I'm getting two for the price of one, as this speaker in here will find a lovely home in an even smaller amp. Okay, so we have removed both of the back panels. Down there you can see the ruby reverb tank, which I'm hoping I can leave in as long as I get to there. I know I'm going to have to pull the chassis, so there's no getting around that. Here are your incredibly cheap EL84s, Chinese made. Again, they needed to keep it at a price point. It works, it's good enough. And your generic 12 AX7s. Not a full EF86 tone stack circuit that the old ones used to have, but again, given the price point and what players play nowadays, this is not surprising. And a very good amp, it's just not period correct. This has got more gain than it should. Part of that is the preamp, part of that is the speaker, and it's not as soft as it could be, again, for the same reasons. But speaker will take care of most of that. So, we're going to pull the chassis, try not to die, see what happens. Okay, so the chassis has been pulled. The reverb tank I'm going to leave in, but I have had to disconnect it. So there you can see, so that's the greenback. Now, one of the things that concerns me, or at least would have had I not known that you could put the speaker in, is you can see the depth of this. Well, the replacement depth is substantially larger. So hopefully it'll be able to, well, I know it will, because people have done it before, and you can actually get this amp with this speaker for almost $500 more. It's cheaper to do it aftermarket, unlike cars. So now comes the fun part. We're going to take this off. We're going to put the new one in. And then comes the fun part of putting the chassis back. Because it's one of those, getting it in is going to be harder than getting it out. Okay, so this is what has come out. So this is the greenback. One of the things that surprised me is the amount of thick doping right on the edge of the speaker. You see that reflection? That is the doping. It doesn't go much into the speaker, but what is present is fairly thick. Now we go over to the vintage 30. We go over to the Alnico 15. You'll notice that it has incredibly minimal doping. But again, 15 watts, not meant to. You're not going to drive this very hard. But the detail on this should be phenomenal. Okay, so the blue has now been installed. We're just about finishing torquing down the 4 bolts that hold it. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do, since I've got everything out, is I'm going to go in and I'm going to retighten all of the screws and hardware that are already in the cab. As most of this has not seen a screwdriver since the factory. And most of the ones that I were taking out were seated properly, but they definitely weren't completely flush. Okay, thankfully almost all the screws are incredibly tight. So now we're going to go with the part that's going to concern me the most, and that is putting the chassis back in. Usually just because it's me, I'm going to have to get all of the bolts seated. I've got 2 coming in here. I've already got the screws ready. So I'm just going to basically push them in, tighten by hand, and then go in with the screwdriver after. I'm going to have to remember to do the reverb tank before that goes in. And I did mark a little more clearly the positive and minus for the speaker hookup. I don't have a lot of leads, and I want to keep everything sort of cinched the way it came. I don't have anything to sort of tie it, no zap straps or things like that. So I'll just take my time and we'll go from there. Then after that will be the back panel and sound test. Okay, so that was actually quite a lot easier than I had thought it was going to be. It was way harder to get the chassis out of the box than it was to put it back in. It was actually quite well engineered to be able to sort of slot, and then the 4 bolts on the side. Now, one thing to note, the back panel is held partly with just basically friction force with those 2 bolts. So I can't actually cinch this up all the way until all the panels in the back are back. But here's a final look with the new speaker installed before it gets all covered up and nobody can see it. Oh, and one more thing of note. You'll note that it is incredibly close to the tubes. There is not a lot of clearance, but it can be done. There we go. And I'll probably change out those tubes next year sometime and then keep the stock ones as backup. Tubes are getting expensive, but they will be getting even more expensive due to the ongoing war and just supply shortages.